This is the smallest 4060 gaming PC I've ever built. At 3.9 liters, weighing just over 8 pounds, it can easily fit into a standard size backpack and takes up very little space on your desk. Compared to a standard mid-tower 50-liter case, this thing is absolutely tiny, but can still play any game at 1080p and most at 1440p high. There's no external power brick, can fit a full-powered dual-slot 4060 GPU, and provides just enough room to cool a mid-range CPU. Let's check out the components I chose for this build and see what it's like to put everything together. For the CPU, I'm gonna be using the Intel i5-13400. I think this is a good pairing with the 4060. It's got a 65 watt TDP, so it should be pretty easy to cool in our ultra low profile cooler. Mid-range has actually been a strength for Intel in the 13th gen, and the 13400 is a really good option for the price. It has 10 cores, 6 of which are performance cores, and the other 4 are efficiency cores. Now, if you want to go on the AMD side, the 7600 is a good alternative. I actually used that in last week's 5-liter 4060 build. With the CPU, you can also use a 12th gen motherboard and DDR4 memory, which can save some money as well. But I will be going with a DDR5 system today. And with that, we need a DDR5 compatible motherboard. So I'll be using the Asus ROG Strix B760i. Now, this has been my favorite Intel Mini ITX board to work with this generation. Basically, it has everything you need for a small gaming build like this. 6 USB-A ports, 2 USB-C ports, built-in Wi-Fi 6, 2 M.2 slots, one of which is on the back, and I overall just like the understated design with the web pattern across the heatsinks. Now, I could do without the game on text at the bottom, but you know, that's okay. In the front M.2 slot, I'll be keeping it simple with a single 1TB M.2 SSD from Samsung. Of course, using M.2 drives are going to give you the fastest speeds, so you'll want to get as much storage as you think you're going to need at this point. And if you want to utilize that second slot on the back of the motherboard, now would be the best time to install it, as it's not going to be that easy to access once everything's put together. For RAM, I'm going with 32 gigs of Corsair's Vengeance DDR5 5600 memory. I bought these a while back and chose 5600 as it's the officially supported stable speed, but you could definitely pick up faster sticks if you wanted. I would try to find ones with an XMP profile if you're running an Intel chip, or ones with an Expo profile if you're running AMD. Those overclocking profiles will ensure that the memory is running at the advertised speeds and have proper timings. You'll just need to enable it in the BIOS. We also need to make sure we use low profile sticks here. Otherwise, there won't be enough room for the side panel to close. So you have up to 42 millimeters of clearance and need to get some sticks that are at that or below. Now we'll also need an ultra low profile CPU cooler. The max height you can fit in the case is 37 millimeters, which fits the Noctua L9A perfectly. Now I went with the Chromax Black version for the all black aesthetic of the case. Now you'll want to make sure that you get the correct version of this cooler for your socket, because they're not universal. So I've got the L9A 17XX version for this build. But if you're going with an AMD 7000 series CPU, you'll want to get the AM5 version, an example. Now, if you're going with a different processor, I would recommend checking out Noctua's site where you can see the CPU compatibility list for these coolers to make sure that the one that you choose will be properly cooled. Now, if you want to use this tiny cooler on a 7950X3D, go crazy. I'm not going to stop you. But I would stick with Noctua's recommendations if you can. And if you do, this can have some very impressive cooling performance for its size. The 13400 is staying in the mid 60s after 2 hours of playing Apex Legends, which I'm honestly really impressed by. I figured the temps would be in the mid 80s or so, which would still be reasonable for a small build, but nope, this cooler is just really effective on the 13400 on this setup. I've kept everything stock and I'm using a standard fan profile. Now, if you're curious about the fan duct mod for the L9A, the cooler is pretty much right up against the side panel at stock, so there isn't even enough room to add the standoffs and close the panel. Installation is very simple here. Just apply some thermal paste, lower the cooler onto the CPU, then gently flip the motherboard over and use the 4 provided screws to secure the cooler. After that, just plug the fan cable into the CPU fan header and we can grab the case. So I'm going to be using the Velka 3 from Velcase. This is the new 3.0 version that just released a few days ago. A huge thank you to Velcase for sending this out to me for this build. This version has made some improvements on previous versions with a larger power button, a new powder-coated steel build, and some updates to the assembly process. This thing is incredibly compact at 3.99 liters and has a pretty interesting build process. First, what we need to do is to remove the front panel by removing the 4 screws located on the top and the bottom of the case. Then once we slide that off, we can access all of the side panel screws hidden underneath the front panel and the back of the case. So now we need to remove the back panel brackets, so there's 5 screws holding them all together. So let's remove those and set them aside. Then we can remove the remaining 3 screws holding that center motherboard tray in place. Now, that's a lot of screws to keep up with. I like to use the lid of my iFixit toolkit to keep everything organized. Okay, now that everything is taken apart, let's grab our motherboard and align it to the 4 standoffs and secure it. We will need a PCI Express riser cable for this. The case does not actually include one, but you can purchase a 290mm PCI Express 4 riser cable like the one I'm going to be using here from Velcase. Let's slide one in into the PCI Express slot. Then we need to flip the motherboard around, feed the riser cable up, and bend it at the top to secure it to the 2 standoffs. And now we can install the GPU. And for this build, I'm going with the dual slot single fan 4060 from Zotac. This is not a cut down version of the 4060 either. It's the full deal with the same 115 watt requirement and a boost clock up to 2460 megahertz. It's just really short at 163 millimeters in length, which will fit right into the Velco 3 that can fit a GPU up to 175 millimeters. Now this has a single 90mm fan setup that I found to be a little louder than Gigabyte's low profile 4060. That's the card I used in my 5-liter build I did last week. The whole system was actually quieter by around 3 decibels. And the fan on this card, I find to have a slightly higher pitch. It's not as bad as like a gaming laptop at full tilt or anything like that. But just compared to the near silence of my 5-liter build, I thought it was worth mentioning at least. I can't complain about the temps though. The single 90mm fan seems to be doing a good job keeping everything cool at around 65 degrees Celsius under a full gaming load at 1080p. And for gaming performance, I'm seeing around 200 frames per second playing Apex Legends at high settings 1080p, and in Cyberpunk Phantom Liberty in ultra settings 1080p, with no upscaling or ray tracing, I'm getting easily over 60 frames per second. Turning on DLSS and frame generation, and I'm getting around 120 frames per second. As of today, this card's actually on sale at Amazon for $280, so make sure to check the link in the description to see if it still is. So now let's install the power supply into the case. I'll be using this 600 watt Flex ATX power supply that you can also pick up from Velcase. This will be more than enough output for this build and has everything we need with the motherboard and CPU connectors, PCI Express connector, and SATA power connectors. Now we can slide it into the bottom here, secure it with 2 screws, and then we can gently slide our motherboard and GPU just above the power supply. Now be gentle here and make sure that the riser cable doesn't catch onto the top of the case. Once that's in, we can resecure the centerpiece to the case and start plugging everything in. All we have is the 8-pin PCI Express power connector. Then on the other side, we have the CPU and motherboard power connectors. Then let's grab those 2 back supporting brackets, resecure those as well. Now the front panel cover has the power button attached, so we can set that next to the case and plug the power switch into the motherboard. For cable management, I've used a little bit of space in the front to stuff the remaining cables. And now we need to put the side panels on before the front cover, as we have those front screws to resecure. Finally, we can slide that front panel on, secure it, and that's the build complete. This was definitely another very satisfying small build and has some impressive cooling and gaming performance for its size. As of the time of this video posting, all the parts I've shown for this build are available at either Amazon or Velco's website. So there's something I mentioned in the last video that got some attention, and I think it's worth noting here as well. I've been using this Genki Shadowcast 2 with my smaller PCs. This lets you use your iPad as a display, and there's a bit of latency, so it's not going to be perfect for esports games, but it works great for playing things like Starfield. And it's very convenient if you already have an iPad or laptop with you, so that you don't also need to haul around a portable monitor when traveling with this mini PC. I'll have a link in the description if you're interested. So anyway, let me know what you think about the build and the Velco 3 in the comments below. I hope you enjoyed the video. A huge thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.